Right. Welcome back, everybody, to the brain injury discussion. This is Jay. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about vocation changes due to brain injury. I have a job, and I'm very thankful for the job. But sometimes your job changes. Just like when I exited the military, my job had to change because that was a vocational change, really, if you think about it. I was able to go to a conference this past April and meet a lot of people who are in the space of vocational changes or vocational rehabilitation or trying to get people who want to go back to work back to work. And I think that's a really big, important thing. And just because you have an injury doesn't mean that your ability to work, it might change, but um, not in every case, but that's a case by case basis. And I think that's something we should take in consideration. But like always, sources will be in the description below. There are four very interesting sources, especially a couple of long-term studies. We'd appreciate it if you give us a like and drop a comment down below if you've had a career or a vocational change. But with that being said, I think we should go ahead and get into it. So, how does an injury affect your job? Well, that's a very interesting question, but let's think about injury, not just brain injury, but let's think about other kinds of injuries. You might be out for a period of time and you're usually rehabilitating. So think about it's not just that you're not there at work, you're recovering from the injury, and that takes time sometimes. Someone who's had a back injury, some lower back pain, that's probably not going to go away in one day. So that's why, maybe you should think about, okay, maybe there is some rehabilitation there. Maybe there is time there. We can talk about supports and the costs that are associated with lost or less employment. You might think, okay, someone's been budgeting a certain way for a certain number of years based on their job, based on their vocation, and all of a sudden that changes due to a brain injury or maybe due to a different kind of injury, and all of a sudden um, that employment income might not be the same, or maybe it might not be there in the future. So think about that an injury can cause a life-changing event that may prohibit you or maybe affect you in your job. There's also barriers to care. So people who might have had a brain injury or otherwise, maybe they don't have the access, especially in rural areas, to get that high quality physical and occupational therapy. Um, Sometimes you're not able to recover fully. And then again, there's other challenges to an injury. You might be thinking, okay, there might be physical challenges. I'm not going to be able to lift a lot of heavy things if my back is hurt. The same thing goes with emotional. If my brain is hurt, maybe something there is not able to handle the stress. Maybe it's mental challenges. Maybe I'm not processing information quite as fast as I used to. And so there's a lot of different kinds of challenges when it comes to an injury when it ties into your vocation or to your employment. Also, this may be a burden, not necessarily a burden, but it could be a strain on those like families and caregivers, but also employers. You think, oh my goodness, Jay is out for a brain injury. He's out a month doing rehab. You got to think about it. A month without one person there is a big, big effect. Because that'll put the other stress on the other employees. And so we're talking multifaceted impact points here, not just if your brain is impacted, but also impact points on your employment or your vocation. So, what are some considerations we need to think about? Well, employers, we should definitely understand the conditions that cause the injury, especially when it comes to brain injury, especially traumatic brain injury. That can change a person on one injury. And so understanding is a good place to start. It's okay to ask questions and let's start to understand these conditions. Maybe implementing some small changes at the workplace. If someone has a really bad knee, they're not going to be able to walk very far. So maybe allow them to park up close. That would be a simple solution for someone who's had a knee injury. But with brains, the solutions might be a little bit more fine-tuning, or it might be a little bit more um, different in the sense that the changes might be less subtle. But think about implementing changes so that way you can keep your employee. And speaking of in keeping your employee, you got to think about that relationship between the employee and the employer. And you think about it, okay, that's a relationship there, a professional one at that, but the employer and the employee have this mutual connection through the work. And so we got to keep and maintain that. Some will say train and maintain survivors. We want to train them up to a certain level, and we want to keep them at that level. We want to keep and maintain that coherence, that cognitive skill, that level that they're functioning at, that level that they can function at. That's a lot to take in. We want to focus on the effectiveness of the solutions. For someone with that knee injury, they might need that closer parking. That's a pretty effective solution because then they're not walking from the middle of nowhere in the parking lot all the way into the work, which could be 100 yards, 100 feet, but maybe they just need to walk 20 feet just to get in the door and sit at a desk. The effectiveness of the solutions. It's not a bad idea to try things. And when it comes to brain injury, sometimes those solutions vary. Maybe less computer time, maybe less mental work, maybe more physical work, maybe a mapped out schedule, maybe a time schedule. Uh, all of those are simple solutions that can go a long way in the field of brain injury. And so effective solutions. Let's work on effective solutions. And it may be a combination of effective solutions because as we can see in this graphic here, this poor guy, he's probably stressed out. Not only does he have a computer here, he's got multiple pens, paper, and of course he's got probably his third or fourth cup of coffee. And so let's think about how we can make an employee's life a little bit easier at their job so they can function at the level that the employer wants. So it's a give or take, but there are laws in place about accessibility and workplace accommodation. So I would advise you to look those up because they're very important. And so, what about this kind of like employee and employer relationship? How do we do this? Well, the considerations are vast and wild. I'm not going to go into this on this video, but there needs to be cooperation. Um, Especially when you're at work. How much time do you need to be at work? And maybe do you need more breaks? Do you need, um, you know, smaller but more frequent breaks? You also got to coordinate that return time to work. So that way you have sufficient recovery time. That way you can get that therapy in. That way you can get that cognitive ability back. That way you can get um, recovered, or at least as recovered as you can be. Workplace accommodations, that's a big aspect of vocational rehabilitation. Simple things like, okay, let's get them to park closer. Let's change these little things. And they can be very fine-tuned as well. And sometimes it may lead to a vocational or position change, and that could due to health conditions. Now, a good example of this would be if you are a CDL or a commercial driver's license truck driver. It's nearly impossible to do that while you have seizures. It's impossible to drive if you have seizures. So, if you got seizures from a traumatic brain injury, that would probably affect someone who drives for a living. Um, and that could lead to a vocational change. What if there's problems with the seizures on down the road? And so that's something to keep in mind. Maybe they need to um, vocational rehabilitate into a position where they don't need to drive for work. The same thing goes with other health conditions. Maybe something with computer screens. As I look through you at a computer screen, maybe the computer screens are just too much. But maybe we can help you find something else that you might enjoy, that you might actually be able to thrive in. And this isn't just talking about making those small workplace accommodations. This is adjusting uh, the environment around the person to where they can not only survive but thrive. Which kind of brings me to this next point, which is optimization. We can adjust the environment to optimize it for someone. Maybe we can move things a little closer to them, or maybe remove the distractions away. Those are simple things that can be done. One, to help the person who's the employee. Two, this could help the employer as well. There's a ton of ways that you can optimize a workplace. And then we look at this, which is called long-term success with the adjustments along the way. Again, this kind of comes from those employee-employer relationship, understanding the injury, understanding the changes that are going to come about. And the ideal is getting that long-term success, which kind of leads me into my next point, which is the study of 15 years. Long-term data is hard to find, but I was able to find this, and this is fairly new. So it is 2023. This is a source I would highly recommend that you look at. In this 15-year study, there was about a 75% employment rate among those with injuries to the brain, including traumatic brain injury. Rehabilitation included vocational development. So someone who had a traumatic brain injury in their past, hey, let's see what you can do. Don't get into that I can't mentality. Let's see what you can do. Maybe we can develop the skill that you can use to maintain employment or gain or maintain employment. And what we see is improved return to work percentages when we include rehabilitation or vocational development, especially helpful for youth and children, especially for those youth and children who have brain injuries. And I was able to pull a little bit of these statistics here. 29% of those that were injured, full-time productive. That's a pretty good number. Another 41% were partly productive. I'm using their terms here. Their terms are productive, which means employment. Um, and so if we combine that, we're looking at about 70%, which is actually really good, 7 out of 10. Now, if we think about it like this, um, it's not just about the money. It's not just about the getting people to work. This is about enabling someone to do something that they want to do, which is work in a field and use their time in a productive manner at a job. And so this could be a source of pride for people. It's like, yes, I suffered a traumatic brain injury in my youth, but now look at me. I'm still maintaining a job. I'm holding my own. That could be a thing of pride. And so let's kind of wrap this all up into a nice little bow. What are my conclusions from this? Well, employment may be possible post-injury. I do stress may. It's not always possible, but it might be something to look into. Changes may be needed, and they might be small or large. All right. Reintegration back into employment. So it's not just that they get injured and they can come right back in. Let's reintegrate them. And then we think long-term adjustments. They can work. In that previous slide, we talked about 15 years of success for 70%, either part or full-time productive activity. Now, those were children with traumatic brain injuries, which is inevitably worse than adults. But that article really pointed out that yes, long-term success can be done in spite of an injury like brain injuries. So with that being said, might be something to consider. But like always, my sources will be in the description below. They're right here as well. We would appreciate it if you give us a like, maybe comment down below. Maybe you've had a vocation change yourself. We would love to hear about different changes in vocation. That's always an interesting subject. And also, we'd appreciate it if you subscribe. But with that being said, I hope everyone has a wonderful day and don't forget, protect your brains.